In a city where the lines between law and chaos are dangerously blurred, I have taken on the roles of judge, jury, and executioner, wielding my badge as a weapon for my own brand of justice. One sweltering Tuesday, a desperate man, bleeding from a knife wound, stumbled into a gas station, forcing me to confront the dark depths of my thirst for power. Upon discovering his ties to a notorious local gang, my instinct for violence surged, propelling me into a shocking act that would forever alter the course of my life. I invite you to delve into my story as a rogue officer, where morality is a distant memory and justice wears a twisted face.
Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content.
It was a stifling hot Tuesday, the kind that made the asphalt sizzle and the air thick with a promise of thunderstorms. I pulled into the gas station, the AC in my patrol car wheezing its last breaths. I stepped out, feeling the heat wrap around me like a damp towel, and the smell of gasoline sting my nose. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in, the cool air inside a stark contrast to the oven outside. The clerk eyed me warily from behind the counter. It wasn't hard to spot a cop these days, not with the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. But I wasn't just any cop. I had a reputation that preceded me, one that was whispered in the shadows of alleyways and behind the drawn curtains of the local dive bars. They called me the judge, jury, and executioner, a title I wore with a twisted sense of pride. The badge on my chest was a symbol of power, and I wasn't afraid to use it. The first time I had crossed the line was a blur of adrenaline and fear. A junkie had pulled a knife on me, and before I could blink, my gun was out and the world was painted with crimson. The justification was easy to come by: self-defense, fear for my life. But the rush, the power of holding that much control over someone else's fate, had been intoxicating. And so, it became a pattern. A pattern of excessive force that I couldn't, or rather wouldn't, break. My eyes scanned the store, looking for any sign of trouble. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting a sickly glow on the dusty shelves stocked with chips and soda. A group of young men in the corner looked up from their huddle, their faces a mix of boredom and resentment. They knew the score, knew that one wrong move could mean the end of their night, or worse. I strolled over, my hand casually resting on my holstered gun. They shifted uncomfortably, but none of them had the guts to look me in the eye. The ringing of the bell cut through the tension as the door swung open, letting in a gust of hot wind. A man stumbled in, eyes wild and desperate, clutching a blood-soaked shirt to his side. Without a second thought, I sprang into action, pushing the group of young men aside. The clerk reached for the phone, but I waved him off. This was my show now. The man slumped against the counter, gasping for air. "Help me," he croaked, the smell of copper and fear mingling with the gas fumes. I took in the scene, the desperation in his eyes, and felt a coldness spread through my chest. This was the kind of moment that made me feel alive, the kind that justified every questionable decision I had ever made. But as I reached for my badge, I noticed something in the man's pocket, something that made me pause. A glint of metal, a symbol that sent a shiver down my spine. It was the same emblem I had seen before, the one that had led to my darkest moments. The man's eyes searched mine, begging for salvation, but all I saw was a target. And as I pulled my gun from its holster, I knew that tonight, the lines would be blurred even further. The echoes of my past decisions were about to catch up with me, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face them. The clerk's hand hovered over the phone, his eyes darting between the blood-soaked man and the weapon in my hand. I didn't need to say a word, he knew better than to interfere. The group of young men in the corner had gone still, their bravado evaporating in the face of the violence that was about to unfold. I stepped closer to the man, my gun pointed at his chest. The symbol in his pocket was clear now, a tiny, intricate knife etched into a metal plate. It was the mark of a local gang, one that had been a thorn in my side for months. They were the reason for my tainted reputation, the reason the streets talked. He knew it too, his eyes widening with terror as he realized who I was. "Drop it," I said, my voice low and steady, the words coming out of my mouth almost of their own accord. The man's hand trembled as he pulled out the knife, dropping it to the floor with a clatter. The sound seemed to resonate in the small, claustrophobic space, and the tension grew even denser. In that moment, I knew I had a choice. I could arrest him, take him in, let the system deal with him. Or, I could give him the justice I believed he deserved. The same justice I had meted out to so many others like him. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic drip of blood onto the linoleum and the heavy beating of my heart. The decision came swift and cruel. The gun in my hand felt like it was made for this very moment. I squeezed the trigger, watching the man's life drain away with the crimson river at his feet. His eyes went wide with shock, then dull with acceptance, before finally going blank.
Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content.
The clerk gasped, the sound like a pinprick in the void that had swallowed the room. The young men stumbled back, their expressions a mix of horror and awe. They had just witnessed the wrath of the law, the kind of power that didn't come with a badge or a set of handcuffs. But as the body slumped to the ground, something within me stirred. A doubt, a question that had been buried under the rubble of my own self-righteousness. Was I really making a difference? Or was I just adding to the chaos that plagued the streets? The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance, a reminder that my actions had consequences. But as I walked out of the gas station, leaving the lifeless body in the stunned onlookers behind, I knew that I wasn't ready to face those consequences just yet. The thrill of the power was still too potent, the need for control too great. And so, the cycle continued. Each night, the judge, jury, and executioner patrolled the streets, doling out his own brand of justice. The fear grew, the whispers grew louder, and the body count grew higher. But deep down, I knew that one day, the ghosts of the men and women I had wronged would come back to haunt me. And when that day came, I wasn't sure if even the badge on my chest would be enough to protect me from the truth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in an eerie orange glow, I received a call about a disturbance at an abandoned warehouse. It was a familiar location, one that had seen more than its fair share of crime. As I approached, my heart pounded in my chest, the anticipation of another confrontation fueling my every step. I kicked the door in, my gun drawn and ready, only to find a young girl cowering in the corner, surrounded by shattered glass and the stench of fear. She couldn't have been more than 15, her eyes wide with terror as she looked up at me, the embodiment of everything she had learned to fear in the world. In that instant, everything changed. The power, the control, the rush, it all faded away, replaced by a cold, hard truth. The girl in front of me was a victim, not a perpetrator. Her trembling hands were not clutching a weapon but a crumpled piece of paper, a plea for help. The symbol on the paper matched the one in the gang member's pocket, but the story she told was one of survival, not malice. Her name was Lily, and she had been kidnapped by the gang, forced to do their bidding. The knife was not a declaration of allegiance but a tool of their cruelty. Her words painted a picture of a life stolen, a future snuffed out before it could even begin. And as she spoke, I saw in her eyes a reflection of the fear and pain that I had caused so many others. For the first time, I felt the weight of my actions. The excessive force, the lives taken, they were not just numbers on a report, they were people with stories, with families, with futures that I had snatched away. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer, shaking the very foundations of the world I had built for myself. Lily's rescue was not the end of my journey, but the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where the excessive force was replaced by empathy, and the badge I wore became a symbol of hope rather than fear. It was a slow and painful process, but with each step, I vowed to make amends for my past, to be the protector I had sworn to be. The sirens grew closer, the cavalry arriving to take over the scene. But as I knelt beside Lily, offering what comfort I could, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. The battle to regain the trust of the community, to change the narrative of the streets, and to find redemption for the sins I had committed in the name of justice. The story of the rogue cop was far from over, but as the night grew darker, a flicker of light emerged from the shadows. It was a light of hope, a beacon guiding me towards the path of true justice. And as I escorted Lily to safety, the weight of the badge on my chest felt lighter, the future less certain, but the resolve in my heart stronger than ever. The following days were a blur of paperwork and internal investigations. The whispers of my past transgressions grew to a roar, my fellow officers eyeing me with suspicion and fear. But I held my ground, refusing to be swayed by the ease of the old ways. I knew that to truly change the course of this city, I had to start with myself. I sought out the families of my victims, one by one, offering what little I could, apologies, explanations, and a promise that their loved ones would not be forgotten. Some spat in my face, others wept, but a few, just a few, offered a glimpse of forgiveness. It was in those moments that I found the strength to carry on.
Subscribe now to keep enjoying the content.
And then there were the gang members, the ones who had forced Lily into a life of terror. They had to be brought to justice, but not the kind that I had been dealing out. I worked tirelessly, using the knowledge I had gained from my time in the shadows to build a case against them. An ironclad case that would ensure they faced the full force of the law, without the need for a rogue cop to play judge and executioner. As the weeks turned into months, I watched the city change. The fear that had once suffocated the streets began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. The gang's grip loosened, and the community started to breathe easier. And while I knew that my past would always haunt me, I was determined to make every future patrol count. One day, as I walked the beat, a young boy approached me, his eyes filled with curiosity rather than dread. He looked up at the badge, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a sense of pride in what it represented. I crouched down to his level, offered a smile, and told him that I was there to keep him safe. His mother watched from a nearby window, her expression a mix of relief and hope. This was the moment that inspired me to continue on this new path. The path of redemption is never easy, and it's certainly not quick. But as I watched the boy scamper off, I knew that every step was worth it. For every life I had taken, I would save 10 more. For every tear I had caused, I would bring 100 smiles. And as the sun set on a city slowly healing, I knew that the judge, jury, and executioner had been buried with the last of the gang's reign. In his place stood a guardian, a protector, a symbol of hope. And so, the story goes on, with each patrol a chance to write a new page in the annals of this city's history. A story of a man who had been lost in the darkness, only to find his way back to the light, guided by the innocence of a girl named Lily and the unyielding desire to set things right. The legend of the judge, jury, and executioner was slowly being rewritten, replaced by the tale of a police officer who had learned that true power comes not from a gun, but from the trust of those he serves.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to help our channel grow.